Goliber, who is currently at the University of Buffalo. She earned her PhD in geological sciences from the University of Texas at Austin. And she's back at University of Buffalo as a postdoctoral researcher working on the GHub, ghub.org. Many of us have been hearing about GHub often, and it's an infrastructure and collaboration gateway for scientific community. So we'll hear more from Sophie about GHub and related areas of research. Thank you so much and welcome, Sophie.
Thank you so much for having me. I also wanted to introduce Dr. Renette Jones-Ivy, who's a data scientist on GHub. And so she's with answering any questions at the end, providing any context for the sort of cyber infrastructure side of GHub. She is she's much better at that than I am. So I will share my screen, make sure I share the correct one. Okay. It looks like I can see that my screen is sharing. All right. So once again, thank you all for having me. It's very exciting to be able to potentially work with iHARP. I think this is an audience that GHub could serve really well. So this is a NSF-funded project where Jason Briner at the University of Buffalo is the PI, and there are many people at Buffalo and other collaborators who are involved in the project. So I have sort of two parts to this talk. The first part is just going to be an overview of like what GHub is, and then I'll be getting into a little bit more specifics about the tool publishing process that may be of more interest to this group. So GHub is what we call a science gateway, and it's providing resources to researchers, educators, and students that are focusing on ice sheet science. This also includes, mountain glaciers and other icy science, but the primary audience that we've tapped into right now is ice sheet science. So that includes paleo, modern, data scientists who are involved, modelers, and really anything in between. So we host and share tools, data sets, and resources. And the main goal here is to sort of unify the very disparate researchers and students that are a part of the ice sheet community that would be better served by working together so we can solve much larger problems. So it is supported by the US NSF and EarthCube. And we're funded, or not funded, excuse me, our cyber infrastructure is based on Hub Zero, which I switched those slides. So let me go to this really quickly. So as I mentioned, our cyber infrastructure is Hub Zero. And so this is an open source software that was developed at the University of California in San Diego. And it was specifically designed to help the scientific community do just what GHub is trying to do, share resources and work together. So we can make interactive simulation tools, share research products, and also provide spaces for people to collaborate in. And so I also included this little napkin drawing of sort of what GHub looks like as a little bit of a flow chart. And so I like to think of it as, we have our community up here. We're sort of disparate clouds. We're all working on different projects, and there are a lot of different resources to try to bring people together. And I would say our iHARP is doing a great job of that. And so GHub is trying to take these modeling data sets, derived data sets, source codes, or other scientific research and resources that don't really have a home and give it a home at GHub. So we offer published educational resources, tools and HPC resources, data sets, and community building platforms. And we want to be able to deliver this back to scientists who give us this material, but also students and teachers who are looking to learn about ice sheet science. So that could be graduate students, undergrads, or even K through 12. And then anyone who's just generally interested in ice sheet science. So the main GHub resources are listed here. We have tools, educational modules, data sets, and publications and other resources. So tools, I'll briefly introduce, and then again, later on, I'll share a little bit more information about what tools we publish. So these are computational resources that you can create, publish, and share on GHub. So you associate background information such as citations or documentation with your scientific code, and you can release the whole package in a citable way. So we have a varying range of tools that we have on GHub. So we have things that are, simple Jupyter Notebook interfaces with interactive code and documentation. So this screen cap on the left is an example of code that was published alongside a paper, and they wanted users to be able to run the code in an executable environment in an interactive way that was published alongside the paper. So users didn't have to go download the source code in order to view it. They could just go and run it on GHub. On the other end, we have more complex workflows that use high performance computing resources at Buffalo and much more complex user interfaces. So this tool over here takes in information given by the user, and then they press a button and they get something back. So there's no code actually being displayed to the user in this case. So data sets on GHub and what data sets do we store? You can think of GHub as a repository for data products that are generated during your research, but we're not trying to compete with the larger data repositories. So oftentimes people use GHub to store large data sets that they want to be made available for computations on our computing cluster. And the biggest data set that we actually host is the ISMEP6 ice sheet model intercomparison project for CMEP6 data sets and other derived data sets related to that. And we have several tools that actually access that data for users to interact with. So you don't need to host your data set on GHub to have it featured. We also include links to those other large data repositories we mentioned. And we also have the ability, if you have a tool that you would like to build alongside GHub that needs to pull data from these external sites, let us know and we can make that happen. Education is also a large focus of GHub. We'd like to, one, give back to the community, and two, there's a lot of educational material out there that could use a home. So these educational modules that we have can be housed and directly launched in GHub for school age, so K through 12, all the way up to university students or for outreach to the public. So we have environments where people can learn to code in R and Python and Octave if that's something someone is interested in. Without needing to install anything, which is really great for learning. Actually, this year I'm teaching a very short introduction to Python class, and everything's being run in GHub because students don't have to install anything and deal with Python while they're learning the language. And we have several modules that we're hoping to publish by AGU that are related to ice sheet modeling, ice sheet profiles. So related to that are these courses that GHub has. So these are, if you've seen or used something like Coursera or EduX, it allows for these open source course offerings to be housed on GHub. So you can create from scratch or turn an existing course and host it on GHub, and it allows for online self-paced learning. So we are actually actively seeking individuals or groups who want to deploy courses on GHub. And if you're interested, I can share the link to the course shell we have for this introduction to Python for Earth Sciences. It's not complete, but if you're interested in getting started and deploying a course on GHub related to your research, we are actively seeking out collaborators related to that. We also host many other resources on GHub, so not just these tools and educational modules or data sets, but on the right here, there's a lot of other resources, we call them, that you can host. And so we've recently had students who have formatted and very nicely documented some function approximation lecture notes on glaciology that they wanted to publish somewhere so that other students could get to them. Lecture seminars or presentations that you would like to share can be all stored on GHub if you would like it to be more readily accessible. GHub also has many other capabilities listed here, such as co-developed environments, HPC resources that you can access, and groups and projects, which are really useful for collaboration. So we offer Jupyter Notebooks and Jupyter Lab, and this starts Jupyter Notebook or Lab in your home directory on GitHub. So you make an account and you get your own environment, and you can launch Jupyter Notebook and Lab directly from your web browser. Currently, we have kernels in Python 3, which includes a geospatial kernel, which includes almost all of the useful packages that people use for geospatial science. And then you can also use the Octave and R kernels. So you can access your own files or files that are stored in project repositories. And you also can run your own Debian 10 Linux workspace from GHub. And this is exactly what I am using to, my students are using to learn Python, because they don't have to go through all of the process of downloading or figuring out what interpreter they should use. It's all just easily launched right from the web, and I don't have to deal with any of the annoying Python things when trying to teach them. We also offer high performance computing at GHub to users who sort of approach us and want to build tools with us. It's not openly available to everyone at any time, but we do make use of the computing and data storage facilities at UB's Center for Computational Research. So it's used to run certain complex tools or workflows that we currently have, such as that ATM-based crevasse detection tool I mentioned earlier, and house other large data sets. The submit functionality that HubZero has built in and enables qualified users to execute certain codes on CCR. And all these submit commands can be run from the workspace that I mentioned or within the Jupyter terminals. And we also use Globus in order to transfer large data sets in and out of CCR storage if, excuse me, if needed. GHub groups are a collaboration tool that we offer. And so these are sort of a feature that allows communities to grow inside of the hub. So they include things like wikis, forums, blogs, wishlets, announcements, and more. So these are really useful for class projects, individual research groups, or larger projects such as this ISMIP 6 project. So they have migrated over their wiki, which is free for anyone to view. You can go and search this page and look up any of the information that ISMIP 6 has related to their project. But then in order to actually join the group, you have to request to join after making an account, and then you can access all of this other information. So you can make things as open as you'd like them to be or as closed as you need them to be. Projects are sort of a subset of these groups. So within groups, you can make projects or you can make standalone projects. And these are basically just to help with keeping track of projects that you may be deploying on GHub. And each project comes with a repository to share your files and data that's accessible via a user interface or within a Jupyter notebook that we have within GHub. So that's sort of the basic overview of the platform and all of its capabilities. So if you have any questions about that, I'm happy to answer those, but I wanted to go over the tool development and tool publishing process that we have, as I think there are probably many interested parties in iHARP that have tools that they would like to share. So why deploy on GHub? I probably don't need to convince many people in this group, but you know, most people, myself included, would just post their source code, which is great, but then users have to go and download it, unpack it, compile, install it, whatever to get it to work. Make sure they have all the Python packages if we're talking about Python, and then potentially something can go wrong and they email you and they're wondering why the code isn't working. So GHub instead can offer you an executable environment for you to share your code. You can associate any information you need, access data sets, or even store large data sets that are associated with your tool. Your tool will be running in a remote server environment with its own file system, and all of our user interfaces are built in Jupyter Notebooks, which I can explain further. And all of the tools run on a web browser, so anyone, anywhere can access them, no matter what computer they have. So our user interfaces, as I mentioned, are built by the tool developers themselves, and we have two deployment styles. And the first one is this notebook style. And so that's what I shared before. So all code shells are shown. So this is useful in the case of wanting to show a process. If you're using our Intro to Python notebooks, you need to see all the code to understand what's going on, or you want to show a workflow from a paper. This is very useful. But then we also have this tool or app mode style. And so code cells are hidden, but the user interface widgets are visible. So the user just sees everything that you want them to put in, and they click a button and it comes back. And you can have any variation along this continuum, but these are the two main types of tool deployment styles that we see. So as I mentioned before, the user interfaces are built using Jupyter Notebooks, using IPy widgets and hublib. I'm missing a little B here, so this should be hublib.ui. Hublib is a set of widgets that were designed by Hub0 to interface directly with IPy widgets. So they're built off of them, so they work in conjunction, but they have a lot more advanced widgets that we can use. So the file upload and download will give users the ability to upload and download results directly from the notebook. GHub also offers support for building your user interfaces for your code. So when I get to the point where we're talking about how to start sharing your tools, us on the GHub side can help you build those user interfaces, as sometimes it's not trivial, or maybe you don't have time, but we do have people here at GHub in order to help build those user interfaces. So DOIs, GHub does not currently mint our own DOIs, and I'm happy to talk a little bit more about that later, but we did sort of have a kind of a workaround where we have a community on Zenodo where folks can create a citation with their resource and have it linked to our GHub community. So we recognize that many times when people are publishing these tools or these codes, they need to have a citation in order to get something published. So we want to make sure this is as reasonable and seamless as possible. And we also will list the Zenodo citation for your tool or resource on the landing page for your tool on GHub. So the tool example that I keep sharing is this ATM-based crevasse detection and extraction tool, or the ABCDE tool. And this paper, or this tool, was associated with a paper that was published earlier this year from Eric Cicero and others, who was an undergraduate student at UB working with Christian Poinar to build this tool. And so the data for this tool is actually sourced from NSIDC, and they're pulling ATM-based data to detect crevasses in glaciers. And so the tool actually takes this data based on user parameters for an area of the ice sheet and for a specific time period. The analysis actually is performed on GHub, and then plots and outputs are delivered to the user without any coding needing to be done by them. And so this is this exact screenshot that I keep showing because I think this user interface is great. Shows exactly all the parameters that they would need, and then they can run the workflow and get the data downloaded directly to them. So what is the process to actually start to share your, excuse me, to actually share your science with GHub? So first and foremost, you'll have to make an account on GHub, and then you'll navigate to our tools menu and click on how to contribute tools, and you'll be taken to this page that says next steps. And so we always want to make sure that we're getting in touch with potential tool developers first, because the process can be a bit confusing if you've never done it before. And so you can either schedule a meeting with a GHub team member. Right now, that meeting will be with me and Renette. So hello, nice to meet you. You can also fill out our GHub resource submission form if you broadly know what your tool needs, but don't need an immediate response or questions answered immediately. We can chat over email. Additionally, you can just send us an email if that's what you prefer. And we also have a lot of the information for starting tool development on your own. If you are an experienced developer, maybe after, GHub's been around for a while and you guys have been able to deploy some tools, you'll be able to do this on your own. So the process of getting your tool up and running is, first we register your tool on GHub, which is just the basic information on the tool name and version, who can run the tool, and who can access the code. So we always encourage people to make things open source, but during the development stage, you can limit this to the development team. After that, on your end, it then comes to us at GHub and Hub 0, where we create a project area for your tool on the developer side. And so this includes a wiki for project documentation, Git source code control, and a ticketing system for bugs as you're going through the process. Then it goes back to you and you upload your code into the GHub workspace using Git, and you can test these. You can test your code in GHub. And we can also pull directly from GitHub if you have the minimum directory structure needed, which we will, of course, share with you at that time without needing to develop a entirely new Git repository. So once you do that, we install your tool with the latest code and set up those testing permissions. And at this point, GHub is going to be, GHub being the internet at this point, and our tool editors will be here to support you and your tool during this process. So once it's installed, you can launch your tool and start testing it. And if things are not to your liking, you can make changes at this time. Then once you test it and you choose to update it, we then install the latest code, and this process repeats until you are satisfied. After your tool is set, it then goes through our GHub editor testing. So members of the GHub editing team will test the tool, and we just review for usability and offer suggestions for changes and improvements. And developers can add additional tests they would like others to review. You'll have full access to the review process. This is not to sort of stop anyone from publishing. It's just to make sure that we're putting quality tools up and offering suggestions if things aren't working. And this is where we can start the DOI process with Zenodo. After everything is all set, we publish your tool, take one last look, make sure that tool works, and we check in on the tool information page, and then it's all set to go. You are able to update your tool after it's been installed. So after we reinstall your tool, you approve it, we take one last look, and then the new changes are published and it gets updated as a new version, and we can update the DOI at that point. So I was aiming for 30 minutes and I'm slightly under, so we have plenty of time for questions and conversations. I didn't want to take up the whole time because I'd really like to know what iHARP would like from GHub. So I'm going to leave this QR code up for a little bit. It links to just a simple Google form that has a survey, and I'll sign you up for an email list. We also have a Twitter, which is run by me, so it's not super active, or I guess it's not called Twitter anymore, or whatever it's called, and YouTube, where we're posting videos for tutorials, which we're growing, and also the GHub Gateway email list there. So thank you so much. Hopefully this gave you a little taste of what GHub is, and you'll want to share your science with us.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sophie. And also welcome, Dr. Renette Jones-Ivy. We are very excited to talk to you all here. And Sophie, the steps that you walked through, I was actually furiously telling my students, why are you not here in this call? You should be here. So hopefully they saw some of this, they came in. But I'm curious. Yes, that's true. I'm glad there's a recording. So I'm curious if folks have questions. Maybe we can start there. Yes, Mike, please go ahead.
Hi. Yeah, great presentation. Thanks. I was curious. Have you? And I genuinely don't know the answer to this. Have you guys been working with the folks out at Colorado School of Mines that are doing the cryo cloud thing? It's obviously a NASA project. It's not quite exactly the same, but to make a lot of cloud frameworks available for large satellite data sets.
Yeah, so Tasha and I have run I was a part of something that she ran, a tutorial session during the FOGS meeting, Future of Greenland Ice Sheet, Future of the Greenland Ice Sheet, I think is that acronym. It was a meeting. And we're planning on doing the same thing at EGU. So it's going to be like a cryospheric tools session. So CryoCloud will sort of give an overview, and Ghub will actually go last because we're hoping to start to archive some of the notebooks that folks have been making with CryoCloud. So we're hoping to work with them to sort of send people to CryoCloud to learn cloud computing, or using these different packages. But then potentially Ghub can be a place where people can store their workflows or share any products that are output from that. We are still trying to figure out what exactly that looks like. I think, we're working with Q Greenland as well. But the best thing so far is everyone involved in sort of these cryospheric open science tools desperately want to work together somehow and not compete. So yeah, CryoCloud is definitely a good collaborator of ours.
Yeah, and I wasn't trying to bring it up as like a competition, because I mean,
of course,
cloud computing and what you guys are doing aren't. There's a lot of overlap, but they're not exactly the same thing. So yeah, okay, cool.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Yeah, and she just won, I believe, the AGU Open Science Award or something. Tasha did, so that's I'm very excited to see where that goes.
Sophie, can I ask a question?
Of course.
So I teach a data science class for both graduate student and undergraduate student. I'm just wondering, if I want to have access, the student have access to the tools. So how does it work? Do they save their files, the notebook they work on? Do they open an account, or it will disappear after their the session is ended?
So if they're using our Jupyter, honestly, I can actually just go into Jupyter. So the tools themselves, if they're launching any of these tools, any outputs will get saved with anything they change within the tool, or if it's a like a notebook tool such as Alps tool. I'll launch this. Won't be saved within the tool. So this is an example of that Alps tool where he was, the goal was to show code from his paper on his Alps framework. And so you can run these cells and see what they do. But you also have the ability to make changes within this notebook, but it won't save. And so the tool is sort of stable version. But within Ghub, we also have down here at the bottom these code development platforms. And so if we launch this Jupyter Lab, oh, I have too many things open. Let's open that up. This is a instance of Jupyter Lab that's reading my home directory. And so all of this gets saved to your account. So students who, if you would like them to use Jupyter notebooks for their projects, all of this data is saved. So this is all tools that I'm working on within this environment of the Jupyter notebooks within Ghub. So this is saved.
Oh, this is saved.
Yes.
Okay. That's great. And what's the capacity of the Ghub? So I have a 30 students. Everybody use at the same time with Patch the Cup.
Yeah, no, it won't. Right now, new accounts for data storage, a new account will have 1 GB data storage if you're working within your own directories, but we have the ability to increase those if you need additional space for those students. And it all depends on exactly what your students will be doing, but I have 15 students in my class that are all working at the same time. That's fine.
Great, thank you.
Other questions?
Thank you
So-
to people who are sharing links in the chat. That's very helpful.
Yeah, Yuchuan, go ahead, please. Yeah, I think you're muted.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was muted. So I'm a student working on data infrastructure in the iHARP project. So I have some questions about the data you have on GitHub. So I think my first question is, are the data downloadable from GitHub?
So the data that is currently listed on our data page that's hosted on GitHub is actually stored within CCR and is accessible. It is downloadable from CCR, and
So
it is transferable via. Go ahead.
Okay, so then what is your expected working style for your scientists users? So do you want them to use Jupyter on GitHub, or you want them to download the data and work on their own whatever working environment?
Yeah, we would like people to work within Jupyter Notebooks on GitHub. Maybe Renette actually can talk about our processes to interact with the larger data sets that we have on CCR. I'll let her take that question.
For the larger data sets on CCR, the tools can access the data through the tools. So, or we can access the data through Globus. But for the large data sets that we have, then we submit from CCR, we submit our programs, either Python, and we have some MATLAB, that actually access the data on CCR, create reports, create images, and then those are transferred back to GHub for display. And then the output of the programs can be accessed by the user, once the workflow completes. Data stored like in a data directory off their home directory. And so you can actually access that data.
Okay, thanks. And I think my second question is, how do the users work with their own data? So if they have their own, some data, I don't know, but not from NASA, from any source, but their own data on their local machine, can they upload them, or how could they do that?
Well, I think the answer is, as long as the data set is not too large, you can get the data transferred to GHub and work on it directly. But, so far users have a limit, and that can be increased, as Sophie mentioned. But as long as the data fits on CCR in your home drive, then you could access that data. And then there's we have other mechanisms in place where we have data storage on GHub for larger data sets, but for the normal user, you would want to download your data to CCR and work on it. But yeah, that would be the way to do that now. And we have some capability for users to transfer large data sets using Globus. So if you have a large data set, you could transfer it to a Scratch directory on CCR, and then your program can access that Scratch directory. You would probably need to contact us to make sure that your tool is transferring the data properly. Just, let us show you how to set that up properly.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I see a couple other questions, Jianwu and then Christopher. Go ahead, Jianwu.
Thanks for the nice introduction. I'd like to know a little bit internal how you manage this looks complicated infrastructure. Can you explain a little bit Like for example, how many software developers are working on it, and do you have a plan to further improve the platform, or what new capability do you plan to add? Those kind of things. Thank you.
I think, Sophie, we've talked about, you may be the best person to talk about some of the improvements we are looking at.
Yeah, so that is a hard question for me to answer completely because our cyber infrastructure is actually run by Hub Zero. So they employ folks who sort of, they have software developers who handle a lot of the tool installation side that I was mentioning. I know that they are actively trying to improve the usability of the site and how the tool development process works. For GHub ourselves, the biggest thing is trying to help folks put user interfaces on their scientific code. And so we have myself and Renette, and then we have several undergraduates and graduate students who are helping to make their code more accessible rather than just running the source code, as I have showed before, but actually making these tools user-friendly. But I would like to hopefully get someone from Hub Zero on calls with iHARP, because I know that in previous conversations we've had, we want to figure out the best ways for you guys to interface with our HPC and through GHub. And so Hub Zero's data scientist would be the best for that. And so, yeah, I guess all I can say is that I would love to have someone from Hub Zero answer that question a little bit better for you.
Yeah, related on it, I know Hub Zero is a very general platform. I wonder, when you adapt it for GHub, do you see particular a little bit unique requirement for this ice sheet community? For example, special library or special, maybe the data is different. Do you see this kind of a particular unique requirement from the ice sheet community?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that we offer is the ability to have the executable environment so people can share things, but the biggest questions and challenges we have are related to these larger data sets, where to store them and how to access them. And I think that's why Mike's question about CryoCloud was great, because I think as people are learning how to interface with these data sets, rather than downloading them all to your computer and figuring out how to work with them, that's where everything becomes much more powerful. And we want GHub to be a place where people can sort of share the output from that. And then also we found that folks are really interested in getting educational materials. So within the polar sciences, there's a lot of undergraduate students and graduate students who are coming into the field, but maybe haven't found a place to learn about glaciology or ice sheet modeling. And so they're looking for educational material. And so we're trying to build in interactive educational modules and then sharing those courses so people can get sort of spun up a little bit faster on that. And then also we recently are working to get ISSM, the ice sheet system, or whatever the second S is, I can never remember, ISSM installed, so that users can use that ice sheet model. So we're trying to basically make accessing these tools and learning glaciology a little bit faster. And so something from iHARP that may be really interesting would be maybe data science fundamentals, or polar science data fundamentals that new students and early career scientists could be really interested in learning. Yeah, sorry, that was a bit of a long-winded answer.
And I do want to mention that we do have processes in place for running parallel jobs on CCR's high performance compute cluster. So we're actually using the Pegasus workflow management system, and we can, it's set up to run numerous jobs at a time in parallel. and to coordinate the results and then report results back to the user. And we're also looking at other ways maybe to simplify the process, maybe using like mechanisms such as SSHFS so that users have more direct access to their data. So those are some things that we're looking at.
As I'm listening to these responses, I'm jotting notes to summarize something at the end too, because there's lots of different ideas here. But I want to go on to Christopher. He had his hand up as well for a question. Christopher.
Thank you, Vandana. If you would, Sophie, do say hello to Tasha out in Golden for me and my now remote friends from 615 that are up in Buffalo. Great football game. I'm not anyway, I'm an Eagles fan. I'll just say that. So I've been in the business a long time, and one of the things which has challenged certain scientific endeavors is the fact that data sets get revised. Fundamental data sets get modified as they evolve. This applies to ATM, this applies to ISAT data, this applies to Landsat data. It gets reprocessed. And one of the things that I've been through a number of these talks, and I'm not sure that I get a sense that there's a dynamic adjustment process in making people aware that these data sets are no longer what they were. I'll fess up right here that I used to get my early science data sets on CDs, basically. So then then they would just get superseded, and you'd get a whole new set of plastic boxes, which you then had to adapt to. So can you tell me how the system just sort of educates the end user that the data they were using may not be current? That's the gist of the question.
Yeah, so is your question, how is GHub handling that, or in general, or related to like the tools?
Well, it's a multi-layered problem, isn't it?
Yes.
So it's just like making the end users aware that what they were accessing has changed, and maybe in trivial ways, maybe in more substantial ways. It's everybody's in a rush, to process and publish, but these things are constantly evolving. I just got data over the weekend from 2002 that I had been waiting for some time, and it's you have to sort of acknowledge that there's a fundamental challenge in keeping everybody on the current. You can't predict the future, but at least, can you make sure people are current with the data sets that are using? Just a problem that I've seen in multiple avenues.
Yeah, I definitely find that issue. So with GHub, I guess with what I work with more closely is the tools, and we try to keep the versions of tools and updates to tools well documented. So for example, the code that gets associated with the DOI at the time of publishing and what's published within GHub is stable. and updates made to that code or within that tool that are substantial enough get republished as a new version. And that is the latest version that's displayed on GHub. And making sure that that's clear within the tool if consistent users come back to find those changes or see those changes, that's clear. With data, that's a good question, because with GHub, I will say that we have not a lot of data sets stored. They are the same versions that they were, but again, we have the ability to have version control with those data sets as they get updated. There is information about what is being changed within those updates. And then aside from anything that you can store on GHub, we also are aiming to be, I've been calling in my head like a one-stop shop. We're trying to also share things that are not necessarily hosted specifically on GHub. And through that process, sharing, the common data repositories that people use in the cryosphere, tools that may already be published elsewhere. We're not asking everyone to just uproot everything and publish everything on GHub, but sharing that. And through that process, hopefully making sure that the most up-to-date versions of those data sets or data repositories that we're sharing on GHub are there. But I think you're right, and that's something that we should keep in mind and think about how we're going to handle that in the future, and educating people on that on our end as well. So I don't know if that's an answer.
No, it's a fluid situation, and it's made more fluid by, for example, likely budget impacts to NASA, maybe even NSF going forward as fiscal realities get figured out down in DC. But I happen to know that the Distributed Active Archive system, the DAC system that NASA operates, is likely to evolve in the next couple of years, in part because of some of the things that you're doing. I mean, and the way the DACs used to work is not necessarily the way the DACs are going to work in the future. So it's just something to bear in mind that what used to work may be dramatically different in a year or two. I mean, it's really that kind of fluidity in the system, not just the IT part of the equation, but the actual where the data is, what the data is, may be evolving. Who the experts are on the data,
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks. I appreciate your talk and glad you're here.
Thank you so much.
Would the checker tool that checks the data, would that seem to help if people could run their data set through that tool to verify their data set is a proper format?
Oh yeah, so that's so Renat's talking about a tool that the ISMIP 6 is building that basically checks the data set before it gets incorporated into the ISMIP 6 intercomparison project. So definitely related. I think that's something that ISMIP 6 is clearly thinking about. But yeah, and I think in general, I showed some stop gaps maybe in my flow chart of how we want the GHub team to be involved to make sure, a large part is making sure the tools work, but also the documentation is accurate and clear between versions. And so I think that, yeah, all good points.
I think there's been a lot of good discussion. Are there other questions? Any other questions too? So as you were responding to different folks, I was thinking that there are 2 or 3 different threads that come to mind where there could be potential for collaboration for us, and also aspects that we should definitely follow up. And one of the first things I would say is students who are interested in hosting their projects on GHub should reach out to you, fill the form, and follow the steps. which we'll also try to follow up. I would request Nikki and Marissa maybe to remind students to do that. And I think that's probably the first thread of it is research projects. All the different projects that are happening in iHARP. We are posting stuff in our GitHub, iHARP GitHub, and so on. But for the bigger community to access it, GHub already has that user base, so it would be helpful, right? So that could be one tranche of it. And another tranche that Karen brought up was around the teaching and the classroom and the coursework aspects. For example, the data science course that Karen teaches, they are generating Jupyter notebooks, or they may use example notebooks from GHub. So that could be a very nice integration. And both of these aspects will help us with the reproducibility and open science aspects that we want to develop in iHARP. So I would encourage all students here to think about this, how we could integrate with GHub. There's another aspect that I'm curious to hear your thoughts on and see if you've already done something like that, is around hackathons. Earlier today I was talking to Karen about hackathons that we hosted a hackathon last year. We wanted to do more of those things. Have you, hosted hackathons, or is that a possibility as well? Maybe using data sets that you already have, or maybe hosting a new hackathon. I'm curious to your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's actually a really great question, because I'm working with another postdoc here at UB and another collaborator in Canada. We are starting this project we're calling Cryo Code Incubator, and it's to be hosted on GHub. And the purpose of this project is to help and sort of foster a community around code sharing. So we sort of recognize that many people in the cryospheric sciences, unless they're coming from, maybe a computer science or math background, maybe they're coming from, geology, where there's not very much formal coding teaching happening. So they sort of learn on their own. And there's a little bit of a barrier to wanting to share things if you're nervous about best practices, have feedback you're going to get, and if you even think it's going to be useful to others. And so the sort of goal of this project is to have people sort of crowdsource their code snippets, their projects, things that they want to share but aren't necessarily like in a publishable or like polished form, and bring that all together and have a hackathon where we work together to maybe find connections between these projects or build more polished projects, and eventually deploy them as tools on GHub. And so in the spring, we're planning on having this hackathon hosted at Buffalo, and it will be aimed at people who are hoping to share their code or want to learn a little bit more about GHub. So it'll be sort of like a beginner's hackathon, we're trying to think of it as. And that's sort of be our stepping stone to maybe make more complex, longer hackathons through GHub. But yeah, we are in the process of getting that all sorted out now. So hopefully by AGU, actually, I can share a link to the AGU talk that my collaborator will be giving. I will find that, and if I can't find it by the time this ends, I will send it to you. You can email it out. But she'll be talking way more about that community and the hackathon we're trying to build. But if in the future iHARP and GHub want to do a hackathon based on data sets that iHARP wants to work with using GHub's infrastructure, I am very open to exploring that.
That would be very, very interesting for us, especially because we don't want to re-engineer stuff that you already have. The infrastructure that you bring to the table is just amazing, and the community that we want to expand to, that's another aim for us, to be reaching out to the new members, who we haven't talked to, and there's so many different research problems in this space. So that would be something that's on my to-do plate to follow up with you on. But I think, encouraging our students to connect with you, following up. And I think at one point we did talk about like an iHARP segment. Hopefully, as we build this momentum, that we have an iHARP segment where we have multiple projects hosted with you.
Yeah. I also just realized I don't think the scientific program is up yet. I was thinking about last year, but I will send that talk information to you in an email, and you can share that with the iHARP group if you guys would be interested in attending that.
Awesome. Perfect. That sounds great. Wonderful. Other questions? Yes, Anish, please go ahead.
Thanks again for the great presentation. Yeah, it's a really useful resource for the community. I was wondering about your plans for long-term sustainability. There is like the NSF, CSSI program and other programs. And have you thought about long-term sustainability efforts and how that would be supported?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we're thinking about our, proposal writing that's coming up. And of course, NSF doesn't want to fund one thing forever. And so we've been thinking a lot about that. And there are a lot of other science gateways that have been trying to solve this problem. Some of them go through like advertisers, some of them have like subscriptions, but we want this to be free, especially to people who, scientists, graduate students, undergrads, notably, are not the richest people on the planet who are going to pay for these things. So some thoughts that we have about that are, related to eventually partnering with people in ways where we can be written into grants with them, so we can offer even more support and collaboration at the beginning of the project when they're building these tools to make them way easier potentially to deploy on GHub, and we can offer those services at the beginning of projects. And so that gives some funding to GHub because we do need to pay for Hub Zero, of course. But if you guys have ideas on that, I'm very open to them and thoughts on that, because that is obviously, I think, a big problem for a lot of these large projects that are funded by NSF is sort of how are we going to get paid for the long term. And I'm very open to speaking about this and thinking about this. So.
Great, thanks.
Yeah.
I'm glad that Anish brought it up so that we can also consider that as we think of other future projects and so on. That's wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think a big a future idea that I have is definitely writing more proposals that incorporate groups like iHARP to sustain GHub, but also potentially sustain things like iHARP, where we can work together on these large, big questions that people have in the cryosphere. But it's very, kind of hard to get, just a couple people funded when you need these large infrastructures to support you.
Yeah.
So if that's something that iHARP as a group is interested in, I know that we at GHub would be really open to those future collaborations as well.
Absolutely. And there are some, big infrastructural questions, as you mentioned, several of the projects, they use the same common functionality of the infrastructure, and having something like GHub underlying all of this could be a very interesting way to move forward as well.
Absolutely.
Right. Any other questions from anyone? I think we had a very good discussion. We had plenty of time for Q&A, which I really appreciate, because that's where the fun stuff starts happening. We start talking about these things. Sophie and Renette, I think there'll be several follow-ups, as you heard. We'll keep a check on certain things, and then we'll definitely have some follow-up conversations with you all.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm going to put up this slide one more time just so you have the email and can sign up for the newsletter that we have. We've only had one newsletter so far, but there will be more. You can email us at this email here, and then you can also contact us directly on GHub. And I believe my email, I think, was attached to this talk as well. So I'm very excited to collaborate with you guys in the future. So thank you so much for having me.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for the talk, and I'm sure we'll have lots of follow-ups. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.